the sooner you can let go of trying to make fatherhood look like your life before fatherhood, the easier it is going to be.
You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike Campbell. I am your host, Mike Campbell, and today I'm pumped to bring you a good friend of mine, the partner of someone who has been on our podcast before. That is Dr. Ryan Pope, the partner being Amber Hawken. And Ryan is a friend of mine. He's become a friend via my friendship with Amber, and they recently, about 14 weeks ago, had a little baby boy called Anakin, and it's been as anyone as a new parent can attest to, one of those times where there's a lot of joy, a lot of challenge, a lot of frustration, a lot of tiredness, a lot of learning. And one of the things that has come out of this for Ryan is the power of the birth process, but more importantly, like the preparation as a man coming into that, both in supporting your partner and being ready to not only become a father, but to be, and to use the term that Ryan's now using, to be the mountain for her in that birth process. Because if you've had your head buried in the sand, giving birth is quite a fucking hard thing to do. And so what they really came out of that with was like, holy shit, there's so much in this for men to be ready for the birth, and even before that, the supporting our partners in the pregnancy, then in the birth process, and then as a father. The moment, as we touch on towards the end, of seeing your child's eyes for the first time, and then obviously what that does. It's a beautiful conversation where we explore, a lot of the stages through pregnancy, first of all, for Ryan, starting with like when he was first told by Amber that she was pregnant, the immediate freeze that he went into, and then the self-judgment that he had around that, the guilt of like what he was feeling and experiencing. So we kind of go through his journey and his experience through pregnancy and how he prepared himself, how he cleared a bunch of shit in his life, mentally, emotionally, right? A lot of shit that he was carrying, so he could create greater capacity, not only for being a father, but so coming into being, as I said, supportive for Amber, and then of the actual birth itself. That led into all sorts of crazy things, like going into far northwest Queensland for 10 days with water and a basically backpack, and then having to hunt and find food and all sorts of stuff. It's a beautiful conversation. It's Ryan's podcast, Virginity, so I think he did wonderfully well. And there's so much in here, not just for men who are coming up into fatherhood. Maybe it might be on the horizon soon. Maybe you're going to have your second or third child, but for men in general, because there's so much carryover into how we show up in our lives and how we respond to things emotionally when our nervous system gets overawed, and how we respond to these things, making plans or letting our partners into it. There's so much in this. I really love it. So I hope you'll take something from this. I trust that you'll enjoy it. If you know a man who's coming up into fatherhood, then do yourself and them a favor and get this to them immediately. If this is landing for you right now, then you might want to reach out to Ryan and see how you can potentially engage with the support and becoming the mountain for yourself, for your partner, for your child. As always, I appreciate your listenership. If you're new here, hi, make sure you follow us, download, click to subscribe, all those things. Leave us a review. Reviews mean that this gets in front of the eyes and ears of more men who need to get this shit together and step into getting more from life, love, and every day, and becoming a true everyday legend. And now, on to the show. Ryan, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast, brother. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
And for those listening, we're introducing Ryan's podcast, Virginity, today, so I'll promise to be nice and gentle.
Appreciate that.
Okay, brother. So look, I know you, we've formed a friendship via your partner and a friendship. And so some people out there might know who Dr. Ryan Pope is, but I want to come in for a little bit of let's lay the ground and get a bit more kind of backstory on you. And the question I'm going to ask is one I tend to ask, and you can take it wherever the hell you want. And that's who is Ryan Pope?
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's really funny because I always came to the conclusion that who you are isn't what you do. And I think I've been going through a really big transition lately, stepping into fatherhood, but also even on the work front, going through some big transitions as well. So I've actually been asking myself that question a hell of a lot lately.
How you going with it?
Yeah, good. Honestly, it's really actually reflecting on the idea of like removing a lot of those expectations of who you think you are and who you think you were, especially transitioning into fatherhood's a big shake-up to begin with. But yeah, like I have been a chiro for 11 years. And that was a very big part of my life. I would say that was almost my first identity in a way. And that really built a lot of the foundation and taught me a lot about like how I want to practice and the sort of person that I wanted to be. It taught me a lot about like health and healing and lifestyle. And so I'm actually eternally grateful for that. And yeah, I felt like moving into what I'm doing now, which is working with men, preparing them into the birthing space, it was actually how I fell into this was interesting, but the foundation that chiropractic gave me in terms of that holistic, natural way of looking at the body and working with how the body already works, and that vitalistic way of really just trusting the body's innate intelligence to be healthy and organize itself, really served me well, especially when Amber wanted to do a home birth. And a lot of that trust falls in, and you really, if that is your values and your philosophy, you really put it to the test in that kind of situation. So yeah, that has been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, and so you've had this big preparation almost for a shift in a big part of your life, becoming a father, right? Which I suppose if we all zoom out, not necessarily parenthood or fatherhood, but perhaps anything has been a preparation leading into it, right?
Totally.
How would you, because even the idea of a chiro for a lot of people, it's like, oh, that's a dude who just cracks your back. And you've already presented something slightly differently. So can you kind of talk us through that?
Totally. And this is a common thing I talk about at work a lot. Like everyone just thinks that chiropractors just do back pain. But the truth is the only reason a chiropractor cares about your spine at all is it houses and protects your spinal cord and central nervous system, which is how your body creates homeostasis, how it communicates back and forth from the body and the brain, and all those small adjustments to keep your blood pressure on track and your heart rate within normal limits and all your vital nutrients within normal limits are all decisions by the brain. But how those adjustments get made is biofeedback between the brain and the body. So when you're actually taking care of the nervous system, that's what you're actually taking care of. And when you do have issues with your spine, it can affect how your nervous system works. So when a chiropractor is taking care of your spine, is actually taking care of your nervous system, which is that communication central highway. And even when when you see pregnant ladies in practice and pregnant women in practice, it's really looking at that brain, body, baby connection. For normal people, it's that brain, body connection. But if you're pregnant, it's that brain, body, baby connection, which again, only really happens through your nervous system in a big, big way. And so, yeah, those were the main connections that really, really surprised me when stepping into the home birth space, that this foundation of understanding, actually, there was so much sort of intertwined between both of these ways of thinking and both of these philosophies around health and healing.
So then you had this large preparation, and as you kind of said, they're almost an identity shift. in becoming a father, but this preparation a little bit. But as you said, like for 11 years or so, that was kind of my big identity. So then, okay, your partner gets pregnant, which many of us have experienced. And there is some kind of a shift there, right? Like I was actually watching a comedian the other day who, I mean, I didn't follow him when he wasn't a father, and I only really just came across him, but he was talking about, he's got 2 kids now and he's changed. Like, I feel like I've changed for the better. And he's like, it's a giant red flag actually when someone is like, I've got 4 kids now and I haven't changed. And he's like, what the fuck? Why haven't you changed? What is wrong with you?
100%.
So for you, when did that start to shift? Was that like when, because obviously we can, and I want to talk about, like the actual birth process for you guys. It was this home birth, but there's a lot more in and around that. But then there's this 9 months or so leading into that. So how did that look for you?
Pretty, like, something that, wasn't easy to admit straight away was I froze. I came home from work and Amber just dropped a pregnancy test on last night's pizza box, like a fucking mic drop. Boom. What do you think of that? And I was just, honestly, I just done a 12-hour day. I got rocked. And within, like, very quickly did the gravity of that responsibility land. And very quickly after that, like, on reflection, what I realized was that it's almost immediately my body would have known the small cracks that we had in our relationship and the small cracks that I had in my relationship with myself, and those elements of your relationship with your parents that you never really have to look at or face if you don't want to. I mean, I moved out of home when I was 17, so those things really just came in quite aggressively in full force, and I didn't even really know how to process that. I had a tremendous amount of guilt straight away because I'm in this freeze response, and there's this little voice in the back of my mind saying, bro, like, go celebrate, like, aren't you happy about this? And all the emotions that come up with that as well, the self-judgment that comes with, it really took me honoring that that's where I was for a moment and looking at that, as opposed to trying to avoid that at all cost and put this shiny veil over the top.
I should be this, which is challenging, of course, because there is the like, and now how is my partner, and like, what do I think I need to be for her? And sometimes there is a separation that is needed, right? Like, let's say she's like, this is fucking way too much.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, how can I support you? And then over here, I'm freaking the fuck out too.
Totally. And I think the great thing was, Amber was switched on enough to know, like, let's just give this guy a minute. And very quickly, like, I've got some really great men around me, so just being able to voice that, to have some things reflected back, just to really hear and feel that, hey man, like, there is no specific way that you're meant to respond here. Just speak to what's going on. And the truth was at the end of the day, that led to a lot of beautiful conversations, and a lot of healing conversations. And even like, it led me through even just doing a little bit of counseling work around like what was coming up, and just having someone really good to just help unpack that. And once that clarity started to come through, once you can kind of see it for what it is, those nerves start to settle, and you start to kind of like give a voice to those emotions, and it all starts to simmer down. And then you're really starting to have like those vulnerable conversations do lead to intimacy and connection, and all of a sudden you just kind of feel that land in your body a little bit more. And definitely having like responding to that by looking at what came up, and even just looking at how I can choose to engage with that, and the flow-on effects of looking at those things and uncovering those things and communicating those things, it ended up being like one of the biggest gifts already of stepping into fatherhood. And this was before he was even born. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's right there towards the genesis, right? There's
Yeah.
obviously one biological genesis, and there's that you finding out that this shit is happening.
Yes.
Can you, if you can, you've alluded to a couple of things, but like, can you kind of give voice to like, what was the general theme for you in that initial phase that was spinning around your head? You mentioned some guilt at how you were kind of feeling and responding. So what was in that piece?
So I had this expectation that you step into fatherhood and you're already ready. You know what I mean? Like there was this expectation that immediately did I have to have a plan for our family sorted. Immediately did I have to have the ability to communicate and understand what feelings I was having in my body. And even more importantly, like the nature of the mind and how it started to spin. Like I was so deeply engaged with that inner dialogue that it is quite confusing and cyclical. And I mean, they call it the monkey mind for a reason. So it just I felt quite confused and overwhelmed and not really knowing how to engage with that. But obviously, there's that expectation of it being happy and celebration, and no one talks about like that immediate, like how we assume responsibility so aggressively and almost so immediately, without even knowing where that came from. It's like someone just dropping a weighted vest on you without you even realizing. Just oof, oh wow, okay. And then there's also
my life is about to change in a way that I don't really know, but I feel the weight of it massively.
And then the other thing that
right, for me, it was like this instant kind of like protectiveness that just like was like this dust that just like blew up around me, and I'm like, whoa, fucking, what is this?
Yeah. Did you also notice that because your partner's now pregnant, you feel that there must be like a level of protection and shielding? So even bringing that's a reality for you to the table for her doesn't also feel right immediately either. Like I found myself wanting to kind of carry the majority of that responsibility and that burden without even really speaking to it, because I had in my mind that admitting that this is real would put part of that burden onto her. When really what I worked out was, especially like, she already knew. She could see it written all over my bloody face.
Yes, perhaps not everyone has the insight in a partner that can really see that, right? But I hear what you're saying, and I experience that and see that in a lot of guys, right? Like, okay, I now need to. It's almost like at the other end of the cycle, if someone dies in the family, it's quite common for a lot of guys to go, well, I need to take on all of the burden here. And I need to be strong for everyone. And I can't, show that or say that, because then I'm burdening them with it,
Correct.
And it might be like, siblings with a parent. So like, we're technically equal in this piece. Or it could be, like my friend has lost their father. And so it's just like he's struggling. So I need to, fuck, I was close to him too. Like this almost mirrored thing at the start of end of life. Like I need to just absorb and digest and metabolize all of this and not pass it on to anyone else. Not necessarily having been set up with how to do that.
How amazing is that, the paradoxical link between birth and death in that way? It's actually something that's been coming up a lot with conversations that I've been having. I've been finding it really interesting, because that sort of, especially in the home birth community, and they talk a lot about birth being essentially intimately related with death in this way. Like the old you is going to die as the new you is reborn as a father. Like the maiden dies and is reborn into the mother. And your whole life, in a way, this sounds so morbid, your whole life in a way kind of dies and is reborn into this new thing. A big, I mean, Annie's 14 weeks. So like, if I sound like I have it all together, please just know that I definitely don't. Honoring.
Yeah, but we could have this conversation in 14 months and 14 years, right? and we might have a different take on it, but also
sure.
there's so much validity in it now, right? Because
Oh,
you're
for sure.
closer than I am. Guess what? My kids too. My memories have like been a little bit messed up in and around this, right? Because there's so much shit that happens in there. So yes, please, the experience is very valid.
Yeah, it was really just sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. It was really honoring that things are going to change was a really big step. It's not trying to, the sooner you can let go of trying to make fatherhood look like your life before fatherhood, the easier it is going to be. And the more you're going to be looking forward in a way where you can actually create that family life that you want, as opposed to looking backwards and trying to piece together how you used to love and have fun and connect. And like, I was saying to Amber just today, like we had probably the most fun this weekend with a normal family routine than we've had in many weeks, because it's mayhem, and at times and life gets in the way. And I felt like we were able to do more over the weekend, and that just felt like in a little bit more flow as well. Like I think I had that first real taste of halfway through the weekend going like, okay, this is really nice. Like this is what it can look like, at least for now anyway, until things transition again. And then I honestly feel like that same practice of, once again, like enjoying this, but again, if you become attached to the idea that this will be like this for the next however long, I think you're just getting caught in that same thought process again.
Yeah, and we're potentially missing maybe the invitation and maybe the like necessity in change and natural evolution, right? Like as you're saying, if you're 28 and you're like, this is my life, and then all of a sudden you're 34 and your partner's pregnant, it's like, it needs to stay the way it was. It's like, well, that's actually kid or no kid. Like if you're still doing that when you're 48 and 68, like there's an evolution. You can keep the same spirit of who you are, but there's a natural evolution and growth, right? We often have this idea, I think as men, it plays out in different ways, probably for women too, but I'm an adult, and so this is me now. Forgetting that the whole journey of being a human is continual change and growth and evolution, right?
Development.
There's different stages of being an adult, but we often, there's the things that we don't necessarily learn, right? But then we can be presented with a giant slap to the face of like, and you're going to be a father now. Let's take a look at some of that. So then continuing on, right? So that seemed like there's some big realizations like, okay, shit is changing now in my life and who I am. Was that, obviously you spoke to a few conversations and your partner being able to see some of that and step back and then probably facilitate through some conversations. So was that something that then kind of like spanned the length of the pregnancy? Was there some real shift that allowed you to then kind of see and step into a different space for a bit more of it?
Totally. I reckon the second I just chose to engage with it, it all started to shift and move. I really think that freeze response was more of like kind of being overwhelmed at first and not even really knowing where to start. I think the biggest advice I could give would be to like lean on your mates, like unpacking that and it coming out so entangled and messy at first, but as soon as you just start to speak to it, it just, I don't know, the truth becomes a little bit more clear. And then was able to kind of bring a little bit of that clarity back home, communicate that. And I think that might be like another reflection is maybe don't like dump the raw emotions back inward into the relationship, like go out and like, share that with the brothers and gain some clarity and essentially come back with some workable material. Once that happens,
learning some of the quite possibly like similar experiences, if nothing else.
Oh, totally. Even just to be told by your mate, you're like, oh man, same. You're like, oh, fuck. Cool. Like this isn't strange. This isn't unusual. There's something about that I think's a bit intimidating.
Yeah, and to the expectation you've spoken about a few times, we might not even have ever voiced it or thought about it, but then like there might be this instantaneous like, belief that there should be a switch that is just flicked. Like, now I know exactly what to do and how to be and how to transition into this new thing. And maybe we've really dumbed that down by going, yeah, I need to carry all the burden here, which of course is like, there's some real truth and need in that. Like, yeah, you got to step up here, but that doesn't necessarily mean like you take everything on and not have a place for support and emptying, and as you said, coming back, having maybe dealt with the emotions externally, so you can show up a little bit wiser with them internally.
Totally. I think as I said before, just choosing to engage with them created a lot of movement. And then the whole energy, the heaviness of it changed. Like when you realize that, hey, there's opportunities here for clarity and awareness and growth, and like what a beautiful thing to lean into together in preparation of having a baby. And I think, it's when you do start to engage with it and you see some movement and you see that kind of flow on effect, and there's a lot of beautiful things to celebrate when you're not in a freeze response.
But even allowing yourself to have that, as you said, right? But first there was the guilt, like I'm frozen, and now guilt. And if there isn't the ability, maybe the partner, to reflect on Nardia, like maybe you should go sit down with Steve and have a chat, right? That can, and I'm sure this is probably an experience for many guys, that become a whole beast in itself, which could last longer than 9 months. Right. And the part we're going to get to, falls by the wayside, right? Because it would be easy, I think, to go into that mode, even externally. Like the freeze response is bad, like if we go extend it, flee, which a lot of men do, or, fight, like dive into action, isn't necessarily the most effective thing either. If it's blinded and you haven't like absorbed all the stuff that's in there, like the response is what it is, but what comes next is so damn important, right?
Totally. It's really interesting you mentioned that flee and fight response. Obviously those three come together, but I think it wasn't until you said it that it really kind of landed. But there was definitely some fight response in there as well, in terms of, like, I just brought it upon myself to decide that I needed more structure and security and foundation at work, and literally without even really blinking, like I'd already made a plan to put on another chiropractor and what paternity leave was going to look like and all the things that had to be done before I can do that. You just keep stacking these hurdles in front of yourself. And it was definitely like kind of that fight response, because it was so internalized. I didn't, while I would usually with something like this, essentially like present it as a, hey, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking about doing, especially when it's taking so much time and energy and capacity away from your partner who's just told you she's pregnant. That didn't come into my thinking at all. Like next minute, I'm just looking to hire, like looking for new structure. And I dove headfirst into work with the most, in hindsight, the most beautiful intentions. But at the same time, our doula said this to me. She was like, building the veranda, building a cot, and painting the walls is not birth prep. Like that's what we do to essentially like bypass our birth prep in a way. It's literally looking at the physicality of being there, the mentality around being there. And not just physically being there, like really being there. There's a difference, obviously. And
but I love this, right? Because there's this carryover I see in so many men, outside of the birth space. Like if you're not a father now, or that's not for you, there's going to be a lot of things to pull from this. And one of those things would be like how we can actually, it might not even be a moment like that, like here's something big, but we just go about in our lives and in our relationships planning and executing, but not bringing the other person on board with that. And we kind of take it on board and I'll just go about it. And of course, actions speak very loudly, sometimes a hell of a lot more loudly than words, but also our partners want to know and be involved in the plan so that there's buy-in. Right. And so those things can be important, the veranda, the cot, but it's one part of, right? So then please take us into this. So then at some point you get into this realm of birth prep. What did that look like for you guys? What did it look like for you internally, and then what did that kind of become in the broader thing externally?
For sure. I think the first confusion was that I needed more time, more money, straight up.
Right.
Like, I need to create more space. I need more times off. Like, I want to be a present dad. And the hilarity of being a present father once he was born makes you a very absent father before he was born is a strange place to kind of find yourself. And feeling disconnected from your partner while she's pregnant. And Amber was really crook. Like, straight up 6 months of eating almonds and blueberries 24/7 just to not throw up, or to try to like help with that feeling of being really, really sick. So it started off looking like that. And then, the beautiful thing about our relationship is we are really good at communicating. And so when like I had a moment for the dust to settle to really like look at where my time and energy was going in that moment, and understanding that while preparation and the intention and the goal was good to go, how I was going about it could have been so much more sustainable for our today, as opposed to just like everything going towards tomorrow. There was obviously like a real need to like own that, understand that. And I know you said it before, it's like actions do speak really loud, but at the same time, I think what our partners look for is that our words and actions match. There's not just action without words, and there's not words without action, that there's actually like there's synergy there. And so while I had made some commitments, like I pulled back on what I could, just set some good boundaries around like being present at home. And the real birth work was just looking at my relationships with my parents was a big one. There was definitely codependent behaviors with mum playing out. They've been playing out for a while. Like I said, like mum's in another state, so it was so easy to just not even engage with that. But when you've got a son on the way, which I didn't know he was a boy at the time, but you know that they're going to need grandma, you know that they're going to want grandma, and that is like the natural progression of things, and you want them to be exposed to their family as well. And so whatever issues in that relationship realistically have space to play out in other ways in your ability to parent. And so while it seemed like a really rough band-aid to pull off, and something that had like years and years and years to dig in, the beautiful thing was having that conversation and looking at my role in that and expressing what that was like, and taking responsibility for that, and sharing how I wanted these boundaries to work from now on. Man, actually, our relationship got better almost immediately. And if anyone knows what I'm talking about around having codependence with your parents, you think the whole world's going to come crumbling down before that conversation. Like, you just can't see it playing out in any kind of healthy way.
And what did that look like for you in terms of that loosely codependent dynamic with your mother? Oh,
like she would always want to like be closer and engage, and there was like a lack of real genuine like interest and connection going both ways. I felt like a lot of our conversations were very generic, and how you're going, and there wasn't a lot of depth, because I think there wasn't a lot of honesty and rawness about the reality of everything. Was just great and fun and dandy, and it was just years of these very surface level conversations. Maybe because we were avoiding some of the uncomfortable things that had happened in the past, maybe to do with me moving out of home and my parents separating. And really, like, I remember when we spoke, I said to her, I was like, I don't even know how this is going to come out. Like, I just want you to know my intention for this conversation is for us to have a better relationship. There's some things coming up, and like, I can't remember if I told her Amber was pregnant yet. I think I really wanted to have this conversation before she even found out. So it was within the first couple of weeks. And so, it actually, we ended up talking about my birth and what postpartum depression was like for mum, and like her levels of self-judgment around her, what she was like as a mum that she was carrying, and things that I didn't even remember. She was judging herself for being a bad mother, and like that would create distance between us. And like I said, man, these are things that I didn't even remember, which were actually able to come up in conversation. And it's amazing how much we carry that doesn't even really have any reference to the other people that were involved.
Yeah.
And so that was tremendously healing. And because this was quite an old entanglement, like a lot of things collapsed around it. Like I think a lot of those caretaking behaviors, which I would have had with her, were definitely playing out in a lot of other areas in my life. And that kind of, it was almost like that was the foundation. So when that collapsed, a lot of things came tumbling down with it, which honestly created so much space. And I think once I could really see and feel into that, like I was a bit more hungry for like, right, like what else needs tending to right now? Which was really, really cool.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, you know, and there's probably going to be multiple stages of that.
Yeah.
Through the rest of the story and to come in the future is like there's death and rebirth, right? Certain things, old ways of being, old patterns, old patterns in relationships have to die.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Create
and
space
so then there was a hunger. So what came next in that birth prep?
I literally realized that, hey, like they talk about this being the birth portal. Like, what do you want to create? Like, what do you want? What needs tending to were really the two most important questions. And one thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to get rid of my dad bod before becoming a dad. So I actually called up a buddy that I'd done a retreat with. I'd met him on a retreat. And he was just in phenomenal shape, man. He was like 40, like super, super vital. So I just called him up and I was like, hey buddy, you know, I told him the news and I was like, look, I just want to get in phenomenal shape. Like I really want to increase my capacity, have better energy physically, emotionally. And I know a lot of that comes from like just really taking care of yourself. And there was some patterns of self-sabotage playing out around like food and exercise. And I just knew I needed some good accountability. And I really liked how this guy thought. And when we spoke, he was asking me about like my sleep quality and my stress levels and how much stimulants I was drinking in terms of coffee, and just really like looking at this from like a very holistic perspective, which I was super interested in. And so that was a pretty awesome thing to undertake, and was pretty successful as well. So I was pretty happy about that. But it really prepared me for I had an opportunity. I don't know if you've heard of Adam Kavanagh. I had an opportunity to go do a rewilding experience. Sam was probably 6 months pregnant at this point. And this was definitely something I spoke to her about first. But I did essentially like kind of designed and went for my own kind of rite of passage into fatherhood, something that was like pretty intimidating, pretty scary, something that I was definitely going to have to step up for, which is hugely like correlated to fatherhood in my mind and in my body as well. We did 10 days rewilding in far northwest Queensland. So yeah, we're in the bush for 10 days with a guide, with no food, and we essentially had to hunt for our own food for 10 days, which was bloody unreal. And something I wasn't even sure if I was capable of. Which again was quite connected to fatherhood as well. You know, you've got those fears about how that's going to be, and even just going to undertake a 10-day journey of, can I hold myself to a level that I don't even know if I'm capable of? Is that possible? And what would I have to do to prepare my body and mind for that? And just honoring that increase of capacity for that experience was going to carry over into fatherhood anyway, was something that I was really excited to do.
Beautiful. So for you, what because you know, like that is kind of one of the premises in a rite of passage or initiation, right? Like, am I capable of this? Well, one, you don't know because you don't know what it has for you. So
Yeah.
what do you think it had for you?
Oh man, some of the things you'd think, like I mean, we were barefoot. This was December, far north Queensland, so it was like 40 degrees. We had water and bedding in a car. We had hunting crossbows, and we were on Indigenous land up there that Adam had been invited to stay on and have guests, and he'd been part of that community for many, many, many years. You'd think straight away it would be like, do I have the capability to find food, was pretty much the first one, or do I have the ability to face a wild animal? Even if it is with a crossbow, it's far more difficult than you could imagine if it's not something you've done before. And I'm not a hunter, man. Like, I barely went fishing growing up. So I was well outside my comfort zone doing this, but the obvious ones were like coming face to face with some animals, and like one was a 1,000-kilo bull, which was pretty wild. And we were doing, essentially this was a meat run for the local community of which land we were on. And so obviously that was tremendously scary and full on, and came with a lot of emotion around, like, we hadn't eaten in 3 days before we shot that bull. I shot that bull. And I remember being like physically weak in my body, barely being able to pull the bow back at that point in time, and just being really shaky, and all the self-doubt that comes into your mind, which again, like, even I don't think I've not spoken about this for quite a while, but it was so relatable to the self-doubt that you have in any new task that you're undertaking. But even things like, at first, especially the first couple of days, we're just practicing tracking and stalking. And so the very first shift, I think, was because you're so far outside of your comfort zone, I did find myself kind of looking to him for this feeling that, like, I was doing okay, or that this was how I go about it. And because it was so alien, I literally just wanted to make sure, maybe this little voice in the back of my head, that I wasn't at least just wasting my time the way that I was going about it. And Adam's brilliant. Like, he's not there. He's just there to kind of hold space and let whatever happens. So he wasn't there behind me kind of being overly reassuring at all times. And there was definitely on day 2 a moment where you start to get hungry and you're like, fuck, I just need to stop looking around, stop looking back. I just need to do the best that I can with what I got, because if I'm going to be too busy looking over my shoulder, just wanting some recognition that of anything, I'm going to miss a real ripe opportunity to actually create something in this experience.
You're not present for what comes.
Totally. And then all of a sudden, you know, I started like listening to my feet a little bit more, and I was like, man, I got to get these shoes off. And I did the rest of the trip barefoot. Walking to the degree where, like, every step you take, you're literally making sure you're not going to crunch a dry leaf or a twig under your foot, because that sound travels a lot more than you think it does out there. And it's just keeping you from food at the end of the day. And so your intention and your awareness and your level of sensitivity at that point, when I stopped being concerned of anything else except what I was there for, that's when it really became a transformational trip. That's when I really started to hear my own thoughts a little bit more. Another thing that really stayed with me was, so we were doing primitive fire making skills while we were there, and I got a fire going with a hand drill, which is literally just friction with a piece of timber with just your hands. And I kind of got the fire going, and I walked away, and I said something to myself, like I made a negative judgment about the fire, like what I could have done better. Or I realized just how willing I was to critique even something that worked well negatively. And
did the exact point of the task, which was to create a fire.
Totally. And he was like, honestly, man, like, what are you still thinking about this for? We have fire, we're going to eat, we got warmth, like, just let that go. And there was a moment, there was so much silence out there. And so everything you say, echoes, right? And so you really hear yourself differently. And I really sunk in how self-critical I can be for things that really don't need anything except a well done, mate. Like, it actually doesn't even need judgment at all, to be honest. Yeah. And
you did it.
And I realized how much I was pretty much just like ragging on almost anything that I was doing, even in micro ways, which, you know, it's disconnecting. It's you're not really like loving yourself when you're doing that sort of stuff. And I think that has negative effects for sure.
Yeah. And so then coming out of that experience, I'm sure there was a whole lot, man, we could keep talking about that for a while, but coming out of that experience, then did you notice that shift in you coming back into your life, and then obviously in the prep for fatherhood?
Massively. Way more confident, way more just like, I'm okay giving it a crack. Like, needed way less permission to try things. I needed way more assistance. Like, I was so much more ready to fail. You fail more than you win out there. You just need, like, when it comes to food, you need like one win every 3 days. So you're messing up more than you're winning. And so when you do get a win, man, fuck, like, celebrate that. Like, really enjoy that. Like, take a minute to feel that. So often, and I'm speaking for myself here, like, I'll achieve something and I'll barely be through like honoring that achievement was made before that next goal flashes into your mind, and you're already to some degree unfulfilled again. And really,
so it's on the horizon again, and then you're like, well, fuck, I'm not there.
And constantly reaching was reflected
and
back
you
to
know
me.
I'm hearing this double sides of that, which was like, beforehand, not only that, but I was so in my head that I wasn't present for what might come. And when I connected to that, it's like, oh, I can handle what comes. And there's a baby coming. I've never done this shit before, but you know what? I'll be able to handle it.
Well, it's, you know, like,
and that's going to obviously transfer into so many things in life. But then also, like, if the babies come, it's like, the alternative might be, okay, next baby's in 2 years' time. Let's start planning. So, hold on, you got a child here, bro. Like, sit down and be.
Totally. You know, it's think about all the energy it takes to look around, all the energy it takes to over internalize and over analyze, and you could literally just move all of that energy, all of that conscious awareness just into the task.
So then you are, you know, now moving into, like, holy shit, there's something here for men when it comes to birth. There's the birth part, there's everything that we've been talking about so far, and then there's obviously what comes after it. So let's dive into that and your birth experience, but also, okay, for guys who are listening are like, holy shit, that experience sounds pretty amazing in general, maybe, but fucking terrifying. And to prepare for birth, that don't have that option or that capability. What do you think they can start to do to, you know, essentially in one big part internally prepare for the birth and then being a father?
It's totally, there isn't really anything out there currently that I know of, and this is kind of the space where I'm wanting to move into and moving into. It's when it comes to prep, I think it's very specific. Like, you've got your own work to do, and everyone having their individual life experiences and the things that hold them back. It's really about facing the parts of yourself that you haven't been willing to face up until now, because the truth is that you could have easily gotten by not facing them the way that you're living. But when your kids, like children, newborns, young kids, they don't receive just what you want to present to them. Like, they receive everything. Like, who you are speaks so loud they don't even hear what you say. And so when that realization fully landed, I just knew there was going to be no other substitute for literally just kind of doing this work and looking at the parts of yourself that you reject or that you don't feel good about. Those little things that are just like small little voices at first. They just need tending to. So that's the inner
You
work.
don't
And I
shut them
reckon
out and like, no, 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 right? Because that's in denial of, and it's self-deception as well, right? But actually start to explore those. And I suggest if you don't have the tools, find the people.
exactly right.
Mm.
And while, you know, I was pretty equipped at home with a partner that definitely knows how to unpack this stuff, I would still advise going somewhere else to get that help massively, massively.
Yeah, of course, because one of the alternatives, even if it is your partner who can, is like, then they become the dumping ground for all of that. And that's not something that we want anyway, especially moving forward. Like, be communicative and open there. But as you said earlier, like, clear some shit so then you can, you know, bring it more suitably perhaps to the relationship.
Totally. In terms of like looking for a rite of passage, like I think getting out in nature, getting connected with nature, getting connected with those natural cycles, because birth is literally just another one of those cycles. And I think really connecting with that was something. And actually, you know, as I'm saying this, that's actually what I value. That's what was important to me. So the truth is that it could look like anything. But I think it definitely needs to involve something that stretches your capacity physically and emotionally, because both of those things are going to be pushed and stretched stepping into fatherhood. And I think that finding confidence in being stretched and recognizing the gifts and the benefits in that is a really strong exercise to kind of move into in preparation for fatherhood. And it gives you an opportunity, as you're being stretched physically, as you're being stretched emotionally, your shit's going to come up. And it's an opportunity to like check your ego, be humble, look at that, speak to it, share it. I mean, once again, I'm only speaking to the stuff that I find works really well for me, and communicating vulnerably about these things and kind of removing that shame and judgment by presenting that to the world has always been something that like has always been pretty helpful for me. And I see that work really well for a lot of men, but at the same time, there's lots of different ways to engage in this kind of work. And it might be journaling for someone else, but I do think physically preparing your body, preparing your mind. I'm a big fan of nervous system regulation with this kind of stuff, especially stepping into the birth space. Like, if you don't know what I mean by needing to regulate your nervous system, hold a crying baby for 10 minutes and tell me how you feel. Like you'll peak.
Can attest.
Yes. And there's something genetic about it being your kid. Like I've seen stacks of families in practice for many, many years, held many a crying baby, and no cry cuts through quite like Annie's does, especially if he's really distressed. And whether you're learning how to regulate your nervous system so that when your partner is going through a transition and is really, really struggling, that you can actually not get wound up in that energetic chaos of like fear and pain. And you can literally, I'm not saying every birth is like that, but if it is, so that you can literally just be there, calm, soft, gentle, grounded, and be that anchor point for her as she's going through that part of her labor, is massive part. If you want to hold space during that time, like that's the only way you can. It's learning how to sit in the fire of discomfort. And a lot of the men that I am working with in this space already will openly admit, like, I would rather go through something painful and arduous myself than watch my partner go through it. Like, I would rather take on tenfold than watch her go through a tenth. And if you've ever watched a lot of birthing videos, which is something I'm doing with these guys as well, and getting them to express and explain the fears and the thoughts that come up in their body because they get activated when watching these sorts of videos, is going to give them a little bit of a taste.
Yeah,
probably going to be
a
like
little
on
bit.
the day. Yeah, because you ask them, you're like, oh, hey man, like, how you feeling about it? They're like, oh yeah, I feel really good. Like, yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Any
but as you said, like with
like,
your baby, your partner, like that has a whole new depth.
Totally.
Yeah.
So nervous system regulation is a big one, I think, for the birthing space and fatherhood. Like I do a lot of kind of really like cold sort of shock therapy with the cold, because that simulates a trigger beautifully. Like
Yeah.
learning how to move into that, maintain your physical and emotional state with that, look at the stories that come into your mind, and you actually learn a lot about yourself by trying to find your edges in that way. And there's lots of different ways you can find your edge. Like personally, like we've got some guys in the program at the moment where like I don't really feel that there would be a lot of benefit for me putting them through arduous physical tasks because they bloody thrive in that environment. Like we're not going to show them their edges there. Whereas asking them to speak about how they're feeling really intimately, or like share a wobble that they're having with their partner, like the idea of not presenting with that bravado is pushing their edges. Yeah, and you watch that fear response come up in their body. You know, you could ask them to spar with someone, and that probably wouldn't happen. But in this regards, like I guess this is where we're all different, and it's that's why that rite of passage needs to be personalized to some degree. But it all needs to have an element of fear. It all needs to have an element of not being guaranteed. I feel like if there's any protection around your, and let's not be silly, you're about to step into fatherhood. So I think what I did was definitely a dangerous thing to do. I definitely prepared myself pretty intensely for it, but you definitely don't want to be putting yourself in major harm's way or anything like that. Just enough to really kind of show you where you're at with yourself is the goal.
Yeah, and I mean, in the essence of an initiation and rite of passage, there is, will I survive? Yes. And that, you know, survival piece can be many ways, let's say, right? There can be many aspects to it. But then, you know, what comes out of that is this new and evolved person, let's say. And so, okay, so now you're running this thing. You've kind of said, you know, being strong and calm and grounded in this. And there's this term, certainly, that you've been using, which is becoming the mountain, which is you know what you're talking about with the men that you're working with. So can you talk us through like what that was for you, being the mountain, and then you know that might have some play over into the men that you're supporting?
For sure. So Amber's birth at home was 35 hours, which is pretty unbelievable. Like I don't think anyone was expecting that. And Amber's a tough woman. She's played elite level sport. She's emotionally quite strong, owns her own business. Like she's well put together. And the thing is that I've rarely seen her struggle. And this really was extremely challenging for her. There were lots of tears. There was a lot of screaming. There was moments in the shower where she's literally asking me to take her to the hospital, which was literally just coming from a place of just not even knowing how she was going to get through. And all, you know, this is definitely like her story to tell at the end of the day. So I'll just kind of brush over some parts, but there's so much fatigue that sets in. And so that's where that physical capacity comes in, and to be the mountain is to not break your focus from her. And to be able to, like when you think about becoming the mountain, it's being unmovable, being grounded, being super still, being patient. Like, you know, we didn't know whether it was going to be 5 hours or 35 hours, and just being able to be there no matter what helps her feel safe. The mountain also represents like heavily masculine energy. And so while she's in her feminine, literally surrendering, opening, and birthing creation of life, like the more you can hold that masculine pillar, the more you can be still, the more you can be stable, the more you can be lent on, the more she can trust that you're going to be there, the more that she can completely trust, completely open, completely let go, which helps with transition. It helps with the birth, helps with a lot of things, that prevents tearing, stuff like that, from a physical perspective. But it's also an emotional perspective. Like if there's any lack of trust there, I think it can definitely interfere in the birthing space as well, because she's not feeling really safe to completely open and let go and
Yeah.
cross that threshold into the unknown, like
Yeah.
those transitions, from what I could see and what I've been told, are so unbelievably scary. Like you think you're going to die, like you think you're going to break.
Yeah, how can I get through this on a level that we can't even really comprehend, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and so I suppose that the alternative potentially being, if you waver, which is wavering is understandable, but how do you respond to the waver? But if you cave and you can't, like the almost the cliche that we've seen fed us for so long on TVs and movies, like the clumsy kind of dad who like faints and now he's the one getting the attention from the health professionals. There's a screaming message potentially to her, which is like, what the fuck? Like, I can't count on him to be here for me right now.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm the one going through the real shit. Like at the very least, he could stand and be present, right? Which is be that mountain.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's uncomfortable to witness her, but it's nothing on what she's experiencing.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of guys are uncomfortable with discomfort. I think a lot of people in general are quite uncomfortable with discomfort. And I think if being comfortable with physical discomfort doesn't even really prepare you for this either, to be able to step back and just allow. And this is where really trusting in the body's innate intelligence came in. This is where those crossovers from chiropractic came in, is that, do you trust that this is a normal process for her body to go through? Like, do you trust that pain is a part of this process? I was pretty stuck in my head at the idea of like seeing blood. Like that was some fear that I had to move through, because I didn't understand, when blood hits water, especially in a birthing pool, I'm like, is that 300 mils? Is that 5 liters? Like, what are we looking at here? Like, do I need to start like getting the car ready? Like what's about to happen? And, speaking to that for me alone helped with the processing of it. And then just having it reflected back to me that, my doula was hilarious. She was like, oh, you guys are so funny. She's like, we bleed every month. The second you guys see blood, you freak out. So she was like, look, it's a normal part. It's a normal part of this. Like, something that stuck with me is, birthing a baby is as innate as breathing. Was something that really like landed really hard for me. And I think the biggest gem, if I'm literally going to drop the biggest gem for a man holding space for a woman, is trust her. Like, help her trust her body. Help her feel safe to feel into what she needs. And try to be present enough, to be intuitive enough, to be able to hold space intuitively, like physically or emotionally. Like if she's got dry lips, bring her water. Like, don't ask if she needs water. It might sound silly, but when you're in an extremely distressed place, sometimes even stringing a sentence together can be hard, when just, like a gentle hand on the back and the glass in front of her, it's a lot easier to reach for that than to even know what to ask for. It's such, when you're in that birthing space, it's like time breaks down, space breaks down. It is definitely, it's a new world in there, in that container. Yeah.
And I can see, personally, but from what you're describing, the work leading into that time through pregnancy to really, both deal with the shit and also like build a plan with flexibility, because you never know what's going to happen, so that you can then be more powerfully present. And, to that really simple example of not having to ask her, what do you need right now? But coming in and going, here's something.
Yeah.
Right. And because she's focusing on something pretty fucking innate, yet wonderfully, powerfully, incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
And so the least you can do is go, I'll bring you some water. And not have to ask you for that, right? But like be there. Yeah.
Yes. Like having, the thing is as well, is that working through your own shit, expanding your capacity outwardly, but also inwardly. By outwardly, I mean like physically and emotionally being able to handle more stress. But also when we talk about that conversation I had with my mum was actually creating space internally. Both of them are creating room within your capacity to be able to handle more. Because even if you don't think you holding on to that's taking up room, man, it's taken up room. It's taken up probably more room than you realize. And so it is that capacity to, you know, I talk about this when like adjusting as well. Like if you're adjusting a really big guy, it might take, let's say, 60% of your capacity to set his body up and hold him to the point where he can let go, so that you have 40% of your capacity left over to make that adjustment. How, what's the word I'm looking for? Like accurate and intentional and powerful and well-directed and well-timed are you using your last 40% of capacity? Or if you've got enough capacity to set someone up and hold them to the point where they can let go, and that's only taking up 30% of your capacity, and you have the majority left over to be decisive and really intimate with how you're going to deliver that adjustment, like which one do you want? I would always pick the latter. And so if you're rocking up into the birthing space with so much room and capacity left over to hold her, and then for your own benefit, be extremely present in that moment, then there's so much there for you. If all of your attention and all of your capacity just needs to be given to her for what she needs, how about expanding past that? Hold yourself, hold her, and have enough left over to really see in high def what's happening around you, like really, really connect with that eye contact with your newborn for the first time, as opposed to being so at capacity you're in your head still. And so like a lot of this, so often most guys are like, yeah, I want to do this program because I want to be there for my partner. And I'm like, hey bro, like what about you? Like what do you want out of this? Like for me, it was, I just wanted to really, really fully experience the first time I held Annie. That's what I was doing it for. That first interaction, I'd been told, like, I don't know if you were told on the way in, but like a lot of the guys in my circles are like, oh man, that first eye contact, like that first time you hold them, and they're like, you could see they struggle to really like give the words to do it justice, and then they kind of finish with, bro, you know what I mean, like I'll talk to you about it when it happens. Then you're in the dad club. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you'll get it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as a beautiful way to kind of maybe end that, but open the discussion hopefully for many others, is that is also the thing that sets the precedent moving forward, right?
Present father, for sure. Present partner. And just to be able to enjoy your life as a dad.
Yeah, clearing some of the shit. Ryan Pope, thank you for the discussion. So can you share a little bit, you know, becoming the mountain, where you guys can find that and everything? We'll put links and all that kind of stuff in.
Yeah, look, probably just on my Instagram. Like right now we offer a 12-week part online, part in-person container, going through literally everything we've spoken about here on the call and more. There's a 2-day in-person container that we do in the hinterlands of the Gold Coast, which is very much going through that physical work. It's my attempt in making a rite of passage that stretches men physically and emotionally before they get to the day, just in a hope of helping them find their edges and what comes up for them in that time, and how you can work with that in a very, very basic way. But the interest in this has been quite amazing. Like we'll be probably looking at just doing some online stuff, because there's a lot of people that wish they could come to the coast to experience some of this stuff and can't. And we just got to work out what that looks like, because it's really like how to teach someone how to hold space physically. For me, like, you know, it's got to be hands-on. So we need to work out how to do this to just really make it something that's going to make a big difference on the day, just getting over those hurdles. But yeah, working on it and excited about it.
Beautiful. I love seeing it. And you know, as you when you first told me the response, you know, like, oh shit, there's a hunger and a need for this, you know, like we know there's a need, but to see me and going, yeah, fuck, I really want this as well for me, for my family. It's beautiful and a huge supporter of it. So yeah, I don't know when we're going to get this out, but everyone, like, regardless, check it out. Get in touch with Ryan if you want to explore this. If you are, if that is coming up for you, fatherhood, or maybe this, second or third time round, like there's different stages and different deaths and different rebirths, right? And then maybe it's something further down the line for you as well. Hey, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on for your podcast, Virginity. I'm glad we could crack that.
Thanks, Mike. You were nice and gentle. I appreciate it.
Beautiful. Brother, thank you so much. You bloody legend.
Thank you. Take care. I'll see you soon.
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, you like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build that legendary integrity. And remember, everyday men, we thrive when we are championed, when we are supported, when we are appreciated and recognized for who we choose to be in the world. Here is my invitation to both show up and be that everyday legend, and to continue to champion the everyday men in your life.